As I was saying in the last episode, you had the end of More Than Meets the Eye and Megatron escaping, and this led to the original order for the 65 episodes that would have both the first and second seasons. And in those seasons, it would explore more of the relationship of the Transformers to the human beings, Sparkplug, Spike, and then there was another human, a handicapped human being that was added. And also it would flesh out the effects, of course, of Earth on the Transformers. But Nelson Shin, who I had on the other page, and Toei Animation would be responsible for the animated series. And one thing, unlike today, is that the animated series would be broadcast throughout the week. So it wasn't just a Saturday morning thing for children. And this, of course, was before the days of TiVo and on-demand television. And we kids back then, we had to hustle home to watch these episodes and enter the door, throwing our book bags all over the place. God knows where they landed. But you had to hurry up and get back home to see them on a weekly basis. But nevertheless, I'm just going to, for this segment, I think for the next two episodes, I'm just going to highlight a couple of episodes that I think stand out for their writing and for the fleshing out of the trends that I was talking about in the earlier episodes, the trend stackings. But anyway, to pick up on the Cold War theme, you had one of the episodes, episode 7, which premiered in December of 84, the 8th of December of 84, Fire in the Sky. And this episode had a Transformer called Skyfire, excuse me. And he was before the Cybertronian War, he was a scientist slash anthropologist who worked alongside of Starscream. And they, as it turned out, had visited Earth before, and he got lost in a windstorm and crashed on Earth, while Starscream had to go back to Cybertron. And as the Decepticons in this episode were searching for energy, they happened upon, in the Arctic, they happened upon Skyfire, buried in an iceberg, and they dug him out. And they also had to reprogram him and re-energize him, and Starscream, even though Skyfire was an Autobot, had to convince him to become a Decepticon more so than an Autobot, but the programming of the Autobot was still in him. This episode was written by Earl Kress. And what this episode really examined in terms of Cold War thinking was the idea of friends being on opposite sides of the battle. And he joined the Decepticons. Skyfire originally joined the Decepticons because Starscream was there. But then, during the course of the episode, he learned that the Autobots were more of a better fit for his line of thinking, even though he wanted, or he learned, that Starscream had a darker side, and the ideological battle and how that tore friends apart. That was what that episode was more about. And, of course, the new toy of Skyfire, which was, he was one of the Autobots who was designed specifically for battle in the sky. And so this Autobot, unlike the others, would be one of the first flying Autobots before Omega Supreme, who would be another one, but he would be introduced in season 2. And then you would have Power Glide, and there was the Autobot besides Power Glide who was a flying saucer, Cosmos. But anyway, also in the first season, there was the Ultimate Doom. And that was another 3-part episode. Earl Kress would write episode 2 in this series, but in the Ultimate Doom, one of the things that was explored by that episode had to do with the manipulation through the auspices of a human that the Decepticons were working with, who was a cyborg, half human, half robot. But Dr. Arkeville had devised a microchip to plant inside of the Autobot human helper and father of Spike, Sparkplug. And Sparkplug was kidnapped by Laserbeak, and Dr. Arkeville had this microchip implanted behind his ear that would control Sparkplug. But this was a very interesting episode, if any of you ever see it again, because it examined how machines could manipulate human beings, and human beings could be brainwashed by a machine. And this technology is certainly on the cusp now of being realized, but nevertheless, the idea of the negative influences of the machine on the human being. And Earl Kress, who wrote The Ultimate Doom episode 2. And this was certainly a more grittier episode, because you had Megatron just totally, what's the word for that? Reckless, whatever you want to say, just totally indifferent towards the mass destruction of human life as Cybertron was brought to Earth. And as a consequence of that, even though it's not mentioned within the context of the episode, it's just all of these human disasters one by one. But you could see how on Cybertron, the battle or the mindset of the Decepticons was completely ruthless, and even towards each other, because in one of the lines in that episode that stood out, where he said specifically to Starscream that this is he was arguing with Megatron about going after the Autobots, and he said, listen, we will do that at our leisure. Now you're in the way. And he knocked him down And he said, "This is the only warning that I intend to give." In other words, he was going to kill him if he got in the way again. But nevertheless, you could see the viciousness of that war, and you see more importantly, the way in which Megatron, as I was saying more in terms of the comic book, but why Megatron was the leader. He could totally, even if that meant destroying an entire planet, he would win because of that. And this set about the lines of demarcation in terms of the differences between the Autobots and the Decepticons. Of course, Hasbro in all of these episodes would give the directors a list of the toys that they wanted featured in that episode, and Skyfire was one of them who made a return appearance in that episode. But also in this 3-part miniseries, Flint Dille would be brought on. I should say this would mark his real entry into the Transformers universe. And when we come back, we're going to get into more of the season 2 episodes. But this was the real highlight of the first season, Fire in the Sky and Ultimate Doom. Of course, you all can have your own list of favorite episodes, but these episodes particularly dealt with the Cold War themes that were highlighted in Bob Budiansky's treatment of the Diaclone original series. And again, when I come back, we're going to discuss season 2, which really became more complex, more edgier, and wherein Flint Dille would have more of an influence over the direction of the creativity and the kind of writers who would be brought in to flesh out the complexities of the storylines, and would also bring in the more adult, edgier audiences that Hasbro, even though they just wanted to market a toy, but this would lead to the branding part of success in the marketplace.